Hey everybody, Riot Mort here with Riot Kent, and it is time for the patch 12.7 rundown. This is an important patch because this is the patch that the Gizmos and Gadgets Championship will be played on. So it's a pretty big deal. So we want to get the balance as good as it can be. Now that being said, we are coming off of 12.6b, which had a bunch of changes. And typically when we're coming off a B patch, that means, we didn't get a ton of time to respond to that. So there may be some changes from the time you see this rundown till the time it goes live if we do any A patch stuff. But we had some pretty clear directions with this patch that we'll talk about to try to, again, we're really trying to focus on making sure that the Gizmos and Gadgets Championship is as entertaining as it can be. So,
yeah, basically based on the last B patch, we feel like we got a lot of the goal, like the really standout comps. Sivir, Warwick, we managed to tune them down to a good spot. With this, we have a couple other goals that we are trying to hit on, including opening up more ways to play. Another thing that we will go over in detail when we get to that big slide. So
cool. Let's jump into it because, believe it or not, it's not a big patch. A couple big parts, but you'll see. So first off, just a really one worth talking about is that you can actually control which emote comes out of your little legend now. It'll be the one in your center wheel. So if you want to pick a good one, pick it in the center wheel. Just a nice quality of life change that the team threw in. Cool. All right, traits. We are adjusting 3 traits here. The first of which is Scholar. Scholar 4 and 6 have basically been really not great ever since the removal of Janna. And we do kind of want to tempt players into considering those. Also, maybe consider picking up like a Scholar Heart or something like that. And so 4 and 6 Scholar get a pretty big buff. I think the biggest one here, especially if you go by percentages, is like 4 Scholar going from 10 to 15. That is a big buff. So I expect us to see maybe this will help some of the Syndra comps. Maybe Renata actually wants 4 Scholar. We'll have to see.
yeah, a pretty scary 4 Scholar buff, but I think it'll open up more ways to play, more considerations you have to make. Like with Victor, do you have enough damage and you just want more mana generation, don't have a Shojin? Maybe you go 4 Scholar instead of, Arcanist or more frontline or whatever else you're playing with your Victor. So like kind of opens up a lot more different strategies.
Yep. Twin Shot 4 and 5 was just capping out a little too high, especially if you got something like a Twin Shot Heart or anything like that. And so we're just bringing down Twin Shot 4, just 5 AD, Twin Shot 5, 10 AD. This is, again, part of that bringing down the AD and the pace of game because, man, 5 Twin Shot fights are ridiculously explosive.
Yeah, and it was commonly something you didn't appreciate very much just because 2 of the units are primarily like magic spellcasters, but like the damage that came from this was still impactful, and especially for the units that actually use this AD. And so, yeah, we wanted to tune that down.
Yep. Maybe the change in the patch, though, to be honest, even though I'm the one who put it in, I don't think it's going to do that much. And maybe low elo players will hate me for this, but we are buffing 6 Yordle, so that if you want to run 6 Yordle, it should be a little bit more worth it. So that'll lower their mana even more, allow more repeat casts. For some champions, this won't make a big difference, like, say, Corki. For other champions, like, say, Ziggs and, Vex, it'll actually be a pretty big buff. So if you're running that 6 Yordle composition.
Yeah, so this is kind of a way for us to like, once we take enough of the power away from the units, we want to give it back to people who are, because they're played in other comps, such as like Corki, for example, which we nerfed last patch. We kind of want to give some of the power back if you're playing just 6 Yordles, and so this is the way we can do it. And it actually makes a pretty big difference on some units, like Mort mentioned, and Gnar is another one where like he'll take damage and now he'll cast faster with that repeated cycle.
Yep. Okay, champion-wise, there's really only 5 changes. We're doing some large ones too. The first one is Ashe. Now, Ashe gets kind of a nerf because on live right now, she's actually 30 out of 55 instead of 30 out of 60 like she's supposed to be due to an issue in our patching. So we fixed that bug, which nerfs her, but we're actually happy with where Ashe is. So we're buffing her spell just a little bit. Her autos will hit just as hard, but when you get that spell cast, it'll hit just a little bit harder.
Yep. Yeah, you covered this one.
Great. Tryndamere. Tryndamere continues to be one of those 3 cost carries that existed because Warwick was strong, not because he was strong. And so we just want to nudge him a little bit so that maybe he is strong, have that spin hit a little harder. Again, we do want to go light, though. We don't want to like overbuff Tryndamere and have it be a Tryndamere meta or something like that. So just a light buff to his base spell damage, especially at 1 and 2 star.
Yeah, you'll see the 1 and 2 star numbers are bigger buffs than they are at 3 star, and mainly because we've found that like a capped Tryndamere comp is performs pretty well, especially in our like internal simulations. Like he does really well, but the path to get to him is kind of awkward and like not that good. And so by buffing him at 1 and 2 star, you can have a smoother power curve as you try to cap out your comp with the Tryndamere 3.
Yep. Seraphine, another champion that's kind of fallen out of favor, pretty much. So we're going to give her a little bit of love here, let her cast 1 auto sooner, and maybe get some repeat casts. We're not buffing the damage, we're not buffing the healing, we're happy with those numbers, but maybe just allow for some more repeat casts, and maybe consider going back to that itemization where you run like the Shojin and the Morello again.
Yep, and just to clarify that, it's one fewer cast with a Shojin, 2 without, but then 1 fewer cast if you have no items on her. It's like so. Basically, like starting mana has gone down by 10, but other than that, if you have a Shojin, she'll cast in a repeated cycle a lot faster, and so it kind of opens up like if you want to play Seraphine carry, or maybe you just want to throw Shojin on her as like a utility support, kind of that angle will work a lot better.
Yep. Galio. This is a for fun change. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't think this change moves the needle that much, but it should be a little bit of a buff to Galio on the damage side. If you want to try some more for fun builds where you get like the Warmog, Stompio, enjoy it. I don't think this is going to make Galio radically meta, but it should make him, and he was honestly the lowest performing 5 cost, so giving him a little love should buff him up a little bit.
Yeah, playing carry Galio or just stacking a bunch of health on him should be he hits a little bit harder, but it will be significantly tankier basically because if you stack Warmog on him, he has a bunch of health. It's fun, and also just like in general, gives him some more damage even if you don't stack him. So useful change.
Yep. And then Zeri, I think this is probably the one that's going to surprise people the most, but Zeri is still underperforming a little bit. So what we're doing is we're buffing her base attack speed quite a bit, so that an itemless Zeri can actually be a little bit scarier. But then also, for example, if you want to do a different build that doesn't require Ginsu's, that might be more of a play. So you could go like IE Jeweled Gauntlet Hodge and actually have that be somewhat successful. So this should just open up a little more builds and make her on par with some of the other really strong 2-star 5 costs.
Yeah, we wanted to buff her in a way that like kind of not only makes her not only makes her easier to play, but also just increase the flexibility of her itemization. We mentioned this in the postmortem, but basically a capped area can still be very, very scary. But then like a normal, it's kind of hard to get there because she takes forever to ramp up and get to the super high zoom around attack speed. So by giving her a higher base attack speed, she ramps off of that base. And so then she can more easily reach like the exciting cap that she's meant to have.
Yep. Okay, let's talk about the thing we did the most of here, which is augment changes. Generally, as much as I hate to hear it, sometimes there is a little bit of an augment difference, and so we're really trying to make sure that to minimize that so that the augments are a little bit more balanced as much as we could. We also posted that Twitter thread where a lot of you sent suggestions on your pain points. Appreciated sending us that. We used a few of those for sure, and we made a lot of augment changes that should hopefully make the augment system even healthier as we go into the last few patches and the championship. So I'm going to spit them all out on this page, and then Kent, we can highlight any you think are particularly interesting.
Sounds good.
All right, Double Trouble, still overperforming a bit, 5 off of all the stats at all levels. Electrocharge, happy with the change from last patch, but still underperforming, gets a little bit of a buff at all levels, and can no longer appear at 4-6 because, let's be real, you're not switching to an Electrocharge comp at 4-6. Enchanter Soul, underperforming, but we can't really buff the trait much. We buffed a few of the units, but if you want the augment, you can get some extra gold, especially at 1-4, that might be better. 4-score, this is not worth gold, but at silver it might be quite good, and maybe you take it. Remember, 4-score can only show up at 3-3, so worst case, it's a tier 1 that gives you 16 gold at 3-3. Best case, maybe you get some cool carries out of it and actually are happy with the power you got. Golden Ticket, we buffed it last patch, doing that anti-balance thrashing thing. It's not enough, it's still underperforming, gets another buff. Hextech Unity, this augment just didn't work out. It's never fun, it's never good, it's not worth playing. You're running 6 Hextech, and I guess your Aurelia can have Hextech? Ooh, that's not worth an augment. So we removed it, got rid of it. Hextech Heart, this one I admitted on the co-cast when it was pointed out to me that I didn't even realize this, and I wish I had. Hextech Heart is better than Hextech Emblem, because it allows you to run 1 less champion and still hit that 6 Hextech mark or 8 Hextech mark, which is massive. Because of that, It has to be gold. So we're buffing it just like we did to the Innovator Heart. To that end, though, Hextech Crest, we're just going to remove it. There's no reason, kind of like the Clockwork thing. And before you ask, I'll skip ahead to it because Goobums would say it. Scholar Crest, same thing. It's gone. No more of this like Heart and Crest basically being the same thing. The one exception is Mercenary, but that's because those are fun. High Five, kind of like 4-score. It goes from Prismatic to Gold. Remember, it can only appear at 4/6, but 5/5 cost for a Gold tier at 4/6? Maybe that's worth. Irresistible Charm. We couldn't take out the Leona, even if that might have been the right play. But kind of like we talked about in the patch post-mortem, we want to make sure all the class-oriented ones, the ones that are buffing like a trait or something like that, probably should be gold. So Irresistible Charm gets to become gold now. Junkyard. This augment, if you get it at 1/4, is amazing. Probably one of the highest first-place rates in the game. It can no longer appear at 3/3 where it was a bait, but we did nerf it, so now you get a component every 4 turns instead of every 3. Should bring its power down and be more fair. Still very good at 1/4, but maybe not the instant first place that it was. Makeshift Armor 3, overperforming a tiny bit, so it goes down to 75. Pirates underperforming. We want this augment to be fun, so we're buffing the chance from 1 and 2 to 2 and 3 of how often you get gold. And then, like I said, Scholar Crest gone as well.
Yeah. Electrocharge on just want to touch on Electrocharge. Basically, that like if you're playing an Electrocharge comp, you're kind of building around like using it to deal defensive damage in a way, and so like there's no way you're gonna pick it on 4/6, and so that's kind of the thinking like framework that we're going into a lot of these changes is when the augment is basically a bait or like a never take, it feels really bad, and so we want to remove it from those types of scenarios. Another one that feels kind of bad though, that like I feel bad that we are removing it at all, is like Hextech Unity. It ended up not being really great because Alistar is a Colossus, and if you're playing vertical Hextech, you kind of have to give up like one of those unit slots. And so Unity augments are best when you're playing around the 4 and 5 level traits, but the Hextech 4 doesn't really last into the late game as well. So kind of sad that we had to take something like this out because I think there were some fun opportunities with it, but ultimately I think it creates a much better patch because you're kind of removing one of the dead options that you would hit in any of your augment shops. Yep. So
all right, let's keep going because that's not all of them. On to the next slide. Here we go. Sharpshooter. We've mentioned this before, and we keep nerfing it. Eventually, we're going to nerf it to a point where it's doing nothing and it's not fun. Rather than trying to do that, we're just going to up it to Prismatic. It is now a Prismatic augment. It still gets to be powerful. It's still going to be really good, but now it's Prismatic. Sniper's Nest, same thing as all the other class ones we've been talking about, is now gold. So good power there. So Small, overperforming a little bit even at gold, so we're taking 5% off the dodge. Spellblade also overperforming a little bit, so we're just nerfing that 10%. Triforce is another one that with the right builds just ends up being very, very powerful. So we're taking 10% off of all the attack speeds. This one's nice because now all the numbers match. It's like the health is 133, the attack speed is 13, and the starting mon is 13. So it just looks better too. Thieving Rascals is a lot like Junkyard, where now it won't appear on 3/3, where it's too late to benefit from. But it is a little too good on 1/4, so we're nerfing the chance of getting an item to 33%. Tiny Titans. This is probably one of the more controversial changes, but now that you can't get it on 4/6, Tiny Titans is a bad augment. 35 health at stage 1/4 or 3/3 isn't really that good. You lose a lot of carousel priority. But what about if it's a tier 1? Will you take it? And so we've made it a tier 1 now. It's still 35 health. We're not nerfing the health. We'll see if it's worth taking, so it should be interesting. Twin Shot Soul, very, very powerful augment. Doesn't need 8 gold on it anymore, especially now that all the twin shots are great. So it's going down to 4 gold. Windfall, this is one that I'm sure I'll get an earful from certain people on this one, but this goes back to the bloat problem. We do not think this is good for the game long term, but this kind of shows where the power bloat has been, and so we are buffing Windfall at all levels. It is still an augment that basically says you have no combat power, and so we're going to buff it and see what happens here. But we didn't want a dead augment in the finals. Woodland Charm, buffing it up just a little bit. It's still a very good augment in the early game. 1/4, very good. You probably don't want it in the late game, but it doesn't show up there anyway. And then finally, Woodland Trinket, the bullet wound, as we described it in the patch post-mortem. Woodland Trinket just has so many buggy interactions and confusing things. This is not about a power level issue. It's so confusing. So until we can really sort out what a clone is and how it works properly, we are removing Woodland Trinket.
Yeah. To expand further, basically, that like Woodland Trinket doesn't really do what you expect it to do. You kind of like some interactions you expect it to act a certain way and it doesn't. And it occurs a lot more frequently with carries than it does with tanks, because you kind of expect them to like dish out a lot of damage. So like you want it to benefit from like Scholar or whatever else, sort of like shields and things like that. So you can keep that 360 health unit alive. Woodland Charm doesn't have as many of these problems, so we're okay leaving this in the game, and it also provides a lot of power. Just its power level was also better, but Woodland Trinket just wasn't worth like continuing to buff it to keep it like a good spot, powerful spot, or get it into like a more powerful spot. So that's why we're removing it. And for Windfall, in case you didn't watch postmortem, basically we talked about how like some econ augments are starting to get more and more inflated, and we don't think it's healthy long term. We're starting to build frameworks and have like longer talks about how this should look in the long run. But for now, we're doing what's healthy for the game at its current state. But definitely in the long run, you can expect to see these numbers come back down.
Yep. Cool. On the small side, Caitlyn, now that she's, Enforcer's harder to play, just underperforming a little bit, just going to let her cast 10 mana a little quicker. Nothing big there. Cho'Gath, 50 HP. We learned our mistake from the last time when we buffed him 100 HP because, oh my god. But 50 HP should hopefully make Cho'Gath a little more appealing. I think a lot of mutant builds right now are like, how can I get Cho'Gath the hell out of my comp? And then Senna is underperforming a little bit, both as a Socialite and Enchanter. We want her to be an exciting carry that if you itemize and get 3-star Senna and say like an Enchanter Bodyguard comp or a Socialite comp can be good. So just buffing up her base damage 20 at all levels.
Yep, and we're aware that like Cho'Gath is strong. Like his stealing can still be really good, and so like sometimes Cho'Gath dominates your lobbies, but for the most part, it's really difficult to play Cho'Gath, and we're seeing Cho'Gath's power level be too low. So we're going with a pretty conservative buff, just 50 HP, and it does scale with his noms, but playing it safe and just trying to get him to a good spot without making his ceiling like way too good. So
some more small buffs. Ahri tends to be the kind of like the worst 4 cost right now. Don't get me wrong, she can succeed, but the fact that you'd rather have Ashe 3 than Ahri 2 in pretty much all cases, she's very slow to ramp, so we're buffing up her damage just a little bit. Jhin, like we talked about in the patch postmortem, we overbuffed on purpose to kind of see what his ceiling is, so we've put in back the nerf in the middle ground here at 0 to 60. Real talk, if the data comes back and he's actually fine, we'll pull this change. But we really just wanted to be safe and kind of explore sort of the max and mins of Jhin, if you will. Kha'Zix's jump speed increase. This should hopefully help him, be a little quicker and a little nicer. We couldn't, unfortunately, get his movement speed fix in time, so that's still a little janky. But this should help him a little bit. And then Victor right now is the most overperforming 5 cost, and we're kind of okay with that. We want Victor to be fun and exciting, so we went with literally the lightest nerf we could, which is just 5 more mana, so it's just a little harder to get that Victor to cast.
Yep. I think you covered everything on the slide.
Great. More augment changes, because that's the focus of this patch. Basically what you're going to see here is a bunch of get rid of the shit that doesn't work, and a slight buff to keepers. So, slight buff to keepers, no big deal. But let's go over this. Featherweight's at 4/6. That was just this weird binary choice of like, are you running a 2-cost carry? Take it. If not, don't. Woo! Lifelong Learning no longer appears at 3/3 because who has time to stack it once you get it at 3/3? Luden's Echo no longer appears on 4/6. It's a little late to really get that going and build a comp around that. Mercenary Heart and Crest no longer appear at 4/6. Now, we did leave the Soul in, though, because if somebody wants to go from 5 to 7, that's still fun. It may not be the most competitive thing, but we wanted to leave that fun in the game. Rich Get Richer can no longer appear on 3/3. Let's be real. You take it at 1/4 or you don't take it. Stand United no longer appears at 1/4. In the early game when you have no traits, this augment is a dead trait. It's great late game, but we don't need it appearing early game and forcing you to play with crap. Stored Power, same thing as Lifelong Learning, 3/3, too late. Trade Sector, another economy augment, not great at 3/3, gone. True Twos, another augment that like, okay, I have a bunch of 2-star 3 costs. Why do I want 2-star 2 costs? Or 10 gold. No, thank you. Gone. Underdogs, this is probably the weirdest one because how often do you have a tier 1 augment and see underdogs? But realistically, it's not like you can pivot into an underdogs comp, so nope. And then Verdant Veil, 1/4. Really just one of the worst prismatics to get at 1/4. It's amazing at 4/6, not so much at 1/4. So cutting out a lot of these dead choices.
Yeah, and basically, yeah, with like the electrocharge change, basically that we mentioned earlier, was these are just those times when you see it and you're like, I'm never picking that one, not because it's like this can't, it's just not as good as this one for my comp, but like, you know, there's at least some decision making there. This is literally like, I can't play this way, so I'm not going to take it, kind of thing. Or, you know, sometimes it's power, like Rich Get Richer, for example, its power level is just too low at that point in the game. Yep. And so we want to take that choice away so that it's not baiting you into taking something that's just way weaker than it is at 1/4.
Yep. And then finally, just some small bug fixes. Mobile tutorial, Kale now uses their cracked portrait. Silly. This patch, unfortunately, there were some rules modifications that were incorrect that were causing some augments to not appear on 1/4 like they're supposed to be. That has been fixed. And then you're going to laugh at this bug, but we fixed it. Vhagar now correctly only attacks once between casts when he has enough mana to repeat cast, which required Blue Battery 1, Blue Battery 2, 6 Yordle, and Radiant Blue buff. I cannot believe we spent the time to fix this bug, but there you go, it's fixed.
To be fair, it didn't take long, but also because we're buffing 6 Yordle, we had to make sure that if you hit this dream scenario, your Vhagar is repeat machine gun dropping the Fury Horns. So, very important.
Yeah, I would give you $1 for every time this happened in the world next match, and I think I might give you no dollars.
A $1.
No dollars, because you need the Radiant Blue buff and Blue Battery 2 and Blue Battery 1, which means you're only talking about the prismatic tier 1 prismatic lobbies.
More, you can also have 5 mutant spatulas with an Astro lobby. That also works. So,
and somehow you got 5 mutant and 6 Yordle, to be clear.
Yes, 5 mutant, okay. 6 Yordle, and Radiant Blue buff. Easy. Yeah.
Okay.
Don't kill the dream, more. We gotta let the dream happen. When that one player hits it, they're gonna be so happy.
Tell you what, if a player pulls this off, I will gift them $50 if they send me a video, if they can pull this off.
And a Riot Gun Buddy.
And a Riot Gun Buddy.
All right, there you go.
So there you go. There's the patch. Like I said, it's a pretty small patch on the champion side, but very large on the augment side. But I think if you look at those changes, almost all of them are non-controversial and just make the game better. So that should be the win here. Like I said, if we see anything in the data Monday that causes us to make some adjustments, we still can. And I will say, it's one of those awkward situations where if all goes well, we really don't want a B patch. Because what we want is for our competitors who are in the championship to have 2 full weeks to practice on the patch and get good at the patch and feel good about it so we can go into a tournament with like the maximum practice. But if something's out of control and if it would ruin the meta and ruin the entire championship, which, let's be real, our bar for that is pretty high considering Kled existed in the Reckoning one, then we'll fix it. But otherwise, this is it. So hopefully our competitors from all the different regions have a ton of fun and should be a good tournament. So,
yeah. As Mort mentioned, we're going to keep an eye out, as always, trying to make this as good as possible. But you should try, like, we will try not to touch the patch after it comes out, just so that players have as much time as possible, and it's kind of fair across the world that everyone kind of has the same amount of time to practice with the patch.
Yep. So, yeah, I think the interesting, tricky part about this is patch 12.8 actually comes out before the Galaxy's Championship, but because they're playing on Tournament Realm, they'll have the old patch. So,
yep.
So cool. All right, that's gonna do it from us. Until next time, we've got 3 patches left for this set: 12.8, 12.9, 12.10. So we're getting there. So yeah, cool,
exciting stuff. And then it's set 7.
Yeah, right. Maybe set 6.5 has been dragged on a bit. Look, anytime I can make that dragon pun, you know I'm gonna. So, all right, that's gonna do it from us. Until next time, take it easy.